Drums of War, Chapter 9, Finding Out. On the shipyards orbiting the forge of Esnuva, Laborer 12321453 offered gratitude to the priestesses, for this sight had spared the lowly such as he. If not for the beetle, his aging bones would have made his worth to the forges fall, and his worth to the altar rise. Give praise to the sight of the priestesses, for they saw the unworthy pour their blood from the Exur when worthy Exarch did yet draw breath. Yet he was pleased to make worth of himself at the shipyards. Why shouldn't he? The glorious vessels would fly forth into the starfield to the unworthy to cull them from the lands which rightfully belonged to the Emperor and Empress and their subordinates, thus sparing those of little worth who would be required to sate the thirst of Exur. May the stars tremble at his step in their stead. Now he hated the cowards for hiding so long from their fate, for if they had been discovered earlier, perhaps his father would yet live. Once he had sufficiently abased himself to the local shrine to the Empress, may she see where the unworthy hide. He made his way to his assigned dwelling place. Indeed, today was a very good day, as extraction ships had returned with all which is needful to his trade in even greater numbers than from the onset of the conquest, thus increasing his worth. If he could gain just a little more worth to the shipyard, he may be assigned apprentices to guide that he might to make those young of little worth escape the altar. This is why he was pleased as he entered his assigned dwelling place, granted him by the generosity of initiate highborn Narek Salvon. May his might ever increase, and was pleased to find that his assigned breeding partner also present. "Partner," she said coolly, "you look pleased." "The war goes well, and my worth rises despite these bones," he said. Laborer 22151427 scratched the metal wall with her knuckle horns and asked, "Think you to rise to a warrior?" "Nothing so grand, partner," he laughed. "I hope to be worthy to give instruction to those of little worth, as I was or may be." "This ambition is well, for you can attain it," she said as she swayed towards him. "I too have an ambition. I desire to give birth to a warrior." "You aim too low, partner, for you could be worthy of a name," Laborer 12321453 said with a gentle smile. "Just not," she snapped in reply. "I do not," he said earnestly, "for I believe that you could rise better than the erasing centers to become a true mother." "This you likely say beguiled by my meager beauty. I care not. Leave aside your flattery, and instead give me the seed of a warrior." Laborer 12321453 lay abed in a glow of the completion of his latest task. To sire a warrior might indeed raise his worth. He could only hope that the war lasts long enough for the proving. He hoped indeed that if his assigned breeding partner did become pregnant from their labors together, she would have occasion to demonstrate her skill with babes, and be allowed to raise it herself, and perhaps even be selected to tend the highborn babes. On Newmund, Jax hid in the shadows of an alley and watched the combined arms patrol trundle down the street. It had been 13 days. 13 days, and 7 refugees lay beneath the waves. But still, they found survivors. Still, they liberated prisoners. Still, they held out. The Republic was coming, so Jax led his cell. The Republic was coming, so Jax watched the Exarch tank and the squad trundle down the road. They'd done a little testing, and the hover tanks, well, they didn't like being hit from below. Unsurprisingly, to be sure, but that's why they patrolled with infantry elements now. However, this was their home, not the Exarch's. Little did they know that there was a massive cave a mere 10 feet below grade. They had learned that there were tunnels, and that the resistance was using them to get around. The consequence of another cell getting wiped out in another mining town. But Jax wasn't just some cop trying to defend his home. He was a trained R&I drop trooper, and so he knew how to run OPSEC. The tank shuddered over the proper location, then he clicked his radio twice. There were 7 muted explosions. The Exarch infantry stopped and took aim, anticipating the coming attack. However, they should have looked to their feet, where the large cracks were spreading in the plastercrete in an oval, with its longer sides kissing the buildings, until the force of tank's grav drive finally caused an underlying stone to buckle, and the entire formation plummeted 40 feet to the hard rock below. He, Ray, Kai, and Ash popped out of their concealment and laid down suppressing fire from the newly elevated positions, and quickly took out the remaining infantry, and also convinced the tankers to stay nice and buttoned up in their tank, too damaged to hover anymore, which is exactly what they needed them to do while May blew the nearby levee, allowing the sea to intrude upon that part of the town, and the street, and the hole in it. They waited for the water to settle, and waited some half an hour more in silence and stillness. Then Jax ordered over the radio, "Ash, go take a look." "You got it, boss," the man answered, and try as he might, Jax could not identify the shadow darting through the water, which was Ash. He suspected that Ash had taken an indirect route, and if he had, Jax would approve. The enemy might have rudely refused to die for them. Then Ash's whiskered face popped out of the water near the center of the new submarine sinkhole. "Looks like they drowned," he said softly into his radio. "Good," May spat over the radio. "Good work, people. Now let's get a move on to the next objective," Jax said. They slipped into the waters of the newly flooded tunnels and followed Kai to the abandoned mine shaft, where they made their exit some 2 hours later. "All right," Jax said softly. "We'll rest here for a bit." Ray patted him on the shoulder and said, "You should sleep a little. I'm fine. Just 15 minutes, Jax. I can keep watch." Jax shrugged her touch off and said, "Kai and Ash take a nap. The rest of you keep watch and eat something. We'll trade off." "Got it," came the reply. 15 minutes. Wake me up on the dot," Jax murmured to Ray. She nodded. One rest and recuperation later, and Ash was sent out to scout the facility. They'd gotten intel on the presence of pups being held hostage in the old school building, which has miraculously escaped bombardment. The public displays that the invaders made of plunging their wicked knives into the bellies of the elderly did not bode well for the captured pups. So Jax and his companions didn't even debate whether they would get the pups away from the invaders, but how and when. The answers to both questions would depend greatly on what Ash came back with. "Jax," came his voice out of the shadows. "We have some company." "What do you mean?" Jax asked as his trigger finger started feeling somewhat itchy. Then a sound came from the darkness that nearly made him weep. "Republican battle cant. Your buddy says that you're a vet from anti-piracy patrols." "Hell yeah," he choked in return as the looming figure of an advanced stealth dropship surveillance scout stepped out of the shadows, even as his scout pattern armor shifted its coloration to blend into his surroundings. "You came!" Ray exclaimed as tears filled her eyes. "Of course we came. Where did you think the supply drops were coming from? We've determined this town is an ideal drop site, as this is the main command hub for the enemy ground forces, so I've been preparing things." "You took out the sacrificer," Ash said in awe. "How do you know that?" Jax realized that the RNI ASDSS wasn't speaking RBC, or even commercial English, but their own language, and decided to keep on with that. "Because it wasn't us, and there's nobody else holding out there." "Just you five? Us and the guards securing the refugees down below," Jax said. "All right. Well, that doesn't change anything. What's your comms?" "Radio. The walk is for ops and ham between cells. You still have ham radios?" "A hobby club started by a human who moved here back just before first contact. It got popular to hear his stories." "Huh." The RNISDSS grunted in a satisfactory, impressed way before he continued. "Okay, I think I'm patched into your frequency. Test, test." Jax nodded when all of the radios also said test, test. "Sir, I'm no sir. I'm still a corporal." "What do we call you then?" "Well, you can call me Lost Boy for now. OPSEC." Jax smacked himself on the forehead and said, "Ancestors forgive me." "Huh? We've been using our real names." "Well, not to be mean, but you guys don't exactly have a very wide pool of names. They probably think that they're code names anyway." "Okay, Lost. We're here on the rescue op. They have pups in there to do ancestors knows what with. And we're not waiting around to watch them get stabbed to death on top of some weird rock." "Gotcha. I'll find me a good firing position and switch the APR over to quiet mode and provide overwatch." "Aye, Lost. Signal when you're in position. 3 clicks on radio. Everyone move out." "One more thing," the Lost Boys said as the group started breaking up. "The drop pods will be hitting about 10 clicks west in about 3 hours. So let's get the kiddos under cover before then. Gotcha?" In low orbit over Newmond, Acolyte Lord Nevex Quinn and Acolyte Lord Gukia Sovan stood before the display screen and made their report to Priest Lord Targlak Palxar. They did not dissemble, exaggerate, or otherwise attempt to save face before the commander. as they knew how dire the position of their invasion fleet had become after the destruction of a single diplomatic vessel. They knew well that they may have to crouch before this new foe for the time being, for the High Priestess had seen that their might was great indeed, yet the dominion of Exarch was also mighty. Moreover, the ever-thirsting Exur made the stars tremble at his steps, commanded their conquest, and could therefore not falter. However, it was up to those who obey that the triumph be as glorious as possible, lest Exur become displeased and demand their blood as the unworthy. Thus, while it might have been wise at another time to embellish the facts in their favor, they knew that such would be short-sighted in this case. Acolyte Lord Narixquin was saying, "I do not expect that we can begin to dominate the mammal worms across the planet to such a degree that they resume their industry at our direction." "Indeed," Acolyte Lord Kukia Sirvan agreed, "had we have gathered that which was already available in either the raw or already processed before we took possession of it. Thus, unless we can send one to delay the Terrans, or at the minimum to Annam, we shall need to move on and raid elsewhere." "Let it be so," the face on the screen decreed. "Carry off with you those adults whose young you have in custody. They shall make excellent serfs in those wet worlds." "We obey, Priest Lord," they intoned, as they bowed and the superior cut the communication. "I shall return to my flagship," Acolyte Lord Narixquin said, and the initiate highborn present moved immediately to accommodate this. "I was pleased to work with you, brother. Would that we had time to subjugate this world. I would think you placed at its altar, and thus find yourself raised up to Priest Lord. My fate is to be covered in blood and glory, brother, such as a task and honor must fall to another." "It troubles me that we could not crush these mammal worms, even after more than 10 days, Acolyte Lord Kukia Sirvan grumbled. "If it were not so, we would not have so many new serfs. It is much the same upon the other worlds infested by these lower creatures. So we have gained much for the Dominion, as have other Acolyte Lords." One shuttle ride later, the Acolyte Lord was in his quarters, enjoying a local delicacy, some kind of water animal with fins. Its flesh was pleasantly tender and sweet. He hoped that he would be part of the forces who would come to return to this place, to conquer this place, for this treat alone. His pleasing reflection on future glories was interrupted by an initiate highborn. "Lord Acolyte, your leadership is needed in the command throne," the initiate highborn murmured with a proper waist-deep bow. "Return to your station, I come." "I obey," he said, and quickly shuffled away. Acolyte Lord was in his subordinate's heels all the way to the bridge, where alarms were blaring. "Report at stations," he commanded. "4 incoming hyperspace exits detected in interdiction zone. Ship class estimation unknown, Acolyte Lord. Their shadows are somehow obscured. Assume the worst. Order all frigates and their escorts to exit sites." "They do exit now, on screen." "I obey." Acolyte Lord Narixquin's amputated hand quaked at the sight of the sensor data rendered visually. The ships were massive, bristling with weapons, platforms, communications, and networks arrays, and bay doors. "Battleships," he whispered in horror. "A hail comes, Acolyte Lord. Refuse it." The main display screen suddenly lit up with a black banner with a yellow star at its center, and what looked to Acolyte Lord Narixquin like a glass planet to one side, accompanied by the audio, "We remember the Sing." "I said to not accept the hail." "Acolyte Lord, they broke through our system with the hail itself, as if they were from the Priest Mastership." Aboard the destroyer Tiger Lily, the squadron has just exited hyperspace, and the enemy was around the space autoplanet of Numid in force. There was even a battleship there, or at least what these genocidal scum thought was a battleship. Corporal Linus George sent up a prayer and clambered into his drop pod. He always hated the space superiority portion of the battle, even against junker pirates, and these freaks had actual weapons. All plasma, but they had reportedly sunk a few Roman Nova ships, which was impressive for plasma only. He was going to show these murderous zealots what happens when you go fucking around and touch a Republican boat. They were in the find-out time. End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.